Morning, everyone. It is 10 o'clock and we're going to make a start. And oh my goodness, am I privileged today. Um, I'm just going to start actually with a very brief introduction to Right Revenue because I was explaining to Michael, whereas we used to have a very Irish and UK audience, we now our audience has grown and we had 191 people register for today's session. So for those of you who don't know us, we've recently been described as a revenue software solution with a consultancy hangover. And I absolutely love that description because we do have a full revenue management software product doing forecasting and recommendations. But because it was built off 20 years of revenue management consultancy, we feel that we're very close to revenue managers and very close to the industry and hopefully understand the problems. And I guess that's where this series has come from, that we really wanted to give back to the industry during this time. And this is our third series of Revenue Ready. And we've been covering all sorts of topics along the way. But today, I actually just did make some notes, Michael, because I didn't want to do you a disservice. I guess how I describe you is teacher, mentor, leader, and absolutely one of our industry's global leaders in revenue management. Like there's literally very few that sit as high as Michael. And we are very privileged to have every speaker in the Revenue Ready series, but I guess there's a few people that I can say that I have a professional, Yona won't mind me saying this, a professional revenue crush on you, Michael, and would literally travel to the UK to hear you speak. And I'm very privileged that you've interviewed me on panels and I've been able to sit in around the table with you, and I feel very privileged to be able to do that because you literally are not just one of our UK industry leaders, but certainly a global leader, guru, mentor, and probably one of the founders of good revenue management practices. And for you to have given up your time today, we are genuinely really privileged. So thank you so much. And if I could just reach out and give you a hug, I would. I promise I will next time I see you. Michael, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. And I know today we've got a great topic. It's all about leadership, collaboration, and building that culture of revenue management and how we weave that through our business. So I'm just going to hand over to you. What I will say to everyone is we want to make this very informal, very interactive. I'm going to keep interrupting Michael because I've got a million questions I want to ask him, but please just put your questions in the chat box or in the little questions and answers. I'm going to keep an eye on those and ask Michael as we go along. So please be as interactive as possible. We'd love that. Michael, over to you. I'm going to stop talking. Over to you.
Brilliant. I mean, wow, what an introduction. Now I need to live up to it. Absolutely delighted to be on this, and particularly seeing the list of people who are joining. And Adrian's been telling me there's a few people who like listening to these recordings when they're making their dinner on a Tuesday evening. So the gift that keeps on giving. This whole idea for this conversation has come about from quite a few conversations that Adrian and I have had over the years, and we're really blessed here in the UK with the kind of people we've got who have been the backbone and key players in revenue management as a profession in the UK. And I guess just building on the introduction that Adrian's given, obviously the direction you've taken with your business is very much down the systems line, and we have some really strong people on the systems side. We've got people who are fantastic on the process side. And what I really have a great passion for is the people side, which is quite a difficult area within revenue management, as we are pretty much the youngest discipline that you'll have sitting around the decision-making table in our business. And I want to reiterate what Adrian was saying in her introduction, that the whole idea of this is not to be a lecture, as I would do If it was a classroom setting at Glion, where I lecture for the undergraduates and the master's students, this is not a formal, structured, one-way kind of speaking from the pulpit. This has very much come about from conversations, from things that we are really passionate about, and from questions and answers. So Adrian's going to very kindly handle those questions as they're coming in from you, and we absolutely welcome them. We don't want to end this session with 2 questions and a whole lot of stuff that's left unexplored. So I'll manage my time as we go through. But the key question that brought this whole thing about was when Adrian was saying to me, how do you start in developing a good RM culture? And I think this is quite a good way to speak to the point of what I got well known for and what I'm proudest for, both in the Asia Pac region when I was over there and when I came over here to the UK. The things I'm proudest for is building really strong teams that delivered amazing results. I know there's some of you on this call who I was very privileged to be working with when we built an incredibly strong team within a core here in the UK. I arrived in the UK having been head of pricing and revenue management in the Asia Pac region for a core. And when I started here, we were a team of 3, myself and an analyst and a pricing database person. By the time I left a couple of years later, even though it was during the global financial crisis, we had a team of 17. And you can only have that kind of growth in a stressful time for a business if you're absolutely delivering. And we had an amazing team there, an amazing group of people. And the results we achieved were very much through that team. So that's why we're talking about culture. In a similar situation, when I went to IHG, there was a team that was under a lot of pressure. The performance of the hotels wasn't going in the direction that it needed to. And we turned that around, which was a lot of hard work. And developing the culture within the team and where we sat within the broader organization was a huge piece of work for us to all contribute to. And again, over the couple of years I was with that team, we built it up into a very strong team, which had, I think we ended up with about 23 months of consecutive RGI growth, which means you're improving on what you delivered the prior year as well. And that growth continued after I had moved on from that team into franchise support. And that's where I can quite confidently say the strength was not all down to me by any means, because it carried on when I left. The team didn't implode, the performance didn't collapse in a heap. That was a team that we all built together that developed respect from other parts of the business and delivered results. So there are 3 key parts of what Adrian and I have talked about over the time we've been exploring this topic of how do you start developing a good RM culture. And leadership is an important part of it. But make no mistake here, leadership is not just from the figurehead, if you like, of the team. It is from everyone within the team. And we're going to explore that in a bit more detail. And the person who is the figurehead has certain obvious roles in leadership, but there should be an expectation developed within the team that everyone within the team is contributing to that leadership. And we'll explore that a bit more. Another phrase that those of you who've seen me speak on different topics and known me over the years, you know this is one that I quite like to use, talking about dynamic tension. Disagreement is healthy. If you don't have any kind of disagreements going on, if there is no tension between RM and other parts of the business, then there's something wrong. And we'll explore that a bit further as well. And the final one is collaboration. Lovely word, gets used a lot. Very popular thing to read about at the moment, and lots of people will tell you they've got the answers to this. But fundamentally, what we're talking about here is that people working together are far more effective than people who are doing things because of coercion or who are trying to work very much for their own benefit and disregarding the impacts and interactions with others. So we're going to develop on those three key themes today, and just have a bit of a discussion about them. But Adrian and I were really clear that we can't do all of this living in a fairy fantasy land. We need to recognize that the business environment we're in today, and every revenue manager likes an acronym. So here's an acronym to sink your teeth into. Many people are talking about the current environment as being a VUCA environment. So we're talking about volatility, we're talking about uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. You could argue that revenue management for a long time has been working in that kind of environment, but this has just turned up to max volume at the moment, with everything so changeable and from one market to another. We could talk all day about the impact of this. But if you like, that's the challenging reality we work within. But we could also say that our response to that is a VUCA response. And this connects to all three of those areas, those topics that we're going to talk about: vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. There's another VUCA for you. So that's the response to the challenging environments. And I think you can see how the topics of leadership, dynamic tension, and collaboration can all be stitched into this vision, understanding, clarity, and agility in how we handle the challenges and how we respond to them. Adrian, any questions on that scene setting so far?
I suppose, Michael, you and I have talked about this. It's, we know that we want this culture throughout the organisation, but where does that actually start? You talked about it maybe not being right at the top. Can strong revenue managers influence that change in culture, or does it have to come from those leaders down? Is it an owners and managers decision to try and get that culture through the business?
I'm going to say the simple answer to that for everyone that's on this Zoom call and everyone that's listening to it as a recording: it starts with you. And if you are a junior member of a team, if you are an owner of a business, if you're an asset manager, a GM, a revenue manager, part of a large organization, part of a small family business, it starts with you. And everyone can influence the culture around them. One of my favorite questions that I love asking uncomfortable questions of people. One of my favorite ones to throw at my students is to say, do you believe that your actions as an individual, when you're on an internship or anything else, have an impact on your leader? So it's quite easy as an intern, if you've had a bad experience, to look at the supervisors or managers of the area that you've been working in and point the finger at them for their leadership. But if you accept that you have an impact in your behavior on your leaders, then you need to take some responsibility for that. And you can have a positive impact or you can have a negative impact. So the simplest answer to your question is, where does it start? It starts with you and each person. And I think as we get into that next section, looking at leadership, we'll explore what I mean by that from everyone within the team. The leader has a different kind of impact. The owner has a different kind of impact. So does an asset manager. But everyone within the team contributes to the culture. That's the bottom line to it.
Yeah, I agree. I have to say, I agree. I'll let you go. Go on.
Brilliant. Okay. Leadership. one of my favorite things to do when I've got a little bit of time to spare when I'm traveling, go into the airport bookshop and you will find shelves in the business section on leadership. And just turn and have a look at the dust cover, have a look at the back cover. Every one of them will tell you they've got the answers to leadership. So here's me saying to you, I don't have the answers to leadership. But as you can tell from the grey hairs and the grey beard, I've made a few mistakes. I've had a few learning opportunities. Some of you on this call have gifted me some of those learning opportunities over the years. So I just wanted to expand and explore some of those challenging questions that I've had to face that have helped in shaping the kind of teams that I've had the very good fortune to be part of. And one of them very much comes to your previous question. Your team is made up of individuals, and each individual is different. Now, that may sound screamingly obvious. Every person is an individual, every team is made up of individuals. I mean, how blatantly obvious is that? But keep in mind, there are things that go on, particularly in larger organizations, that drag us towards treating teams as kind of one animal, one entity. So we have all these processes around engagement surveys, employee engagement surveys. You're the boss, you're incentivized to have an engaged team. Here's your magic score. It's not where you want it to be. What do? You call your team together, you have a team meeting, and you say to the team, tell me what I need to do to engage with you. What a load of rubbish. If you want to have a really engaged team, you engage with the individuals within the team. There may be some quite common themes, but every individual is different. Their strengths are different, and you want to make the most of the strengths you've got within your team. And over time, you need to build on those strengths. And remember, everyone will also say to you, have good people and you'll achieve good things. When you first take over a team, you don't get to choose who's in the team. You get the team that's there as a leader. When you go into a hotel as a revenue manager, if you're a single site revenue manager, if you're a GM, you get who's there. Now, how do we get the most out of them? Over time, you can add strength. When you get the recruitment opportunities, you can build that team. But if you want to make an impact really quickly, work out the strengths you've got and build on those strengths. Understand the motivations, and they will be different between different members of the team, and understand what their needs are. Remember, they don't stay the same. So a bright young person in your team who's highly motivated, wants career development opportunities and all of that today, gets married. Now the baby comes along, their needs and their motivations change. That may have happened to you, Adrian. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, it probably did. My kids stopped me traveling all over the world. But
there you go. It's all down to the kids.
Actually, that picture there looks very like my daughter. So, yeah, so definitely, no, I completely agree with you. So
from a leadership point of view, and also coming back to Adrian's question, whose responsibility? I could look at this from the perspective of the leader of the team, or I could look at this from the members of the team. If you're responsible for revenue, you're working in a small business, think of the team as the people that you're interacting with in the decision-making process. So every team member, as we said a moment ago, provides an element of leadership. When the figurehead of a team, for want of a better term, makes a decision and says, this is the direction we're going in, it then requires the members of the team to go in that direction. Now, if they refuse to, obviously life gets a bit complicated there, but there is a decision point. Someone needs to take that step. And how do they go about it? All of this comes into leadership. And it's really important we think not just one-dimensionally. The reality of today's world, particularly with COVID giving us fewer resources to work within, is we have a broader range of responsibilities. We live in these matrix environment. It's no longer, here's my boss, that's it. You are connecting in and responsible in many different parts of the business. But you also are operating in teams within our industry. And that's why you've got Jane from Hosper here and myself as well, because we take seriously where we sit within our industry. So yeah, there's the traditional hierarchy and that kind of team. There's your peers, that the classic hotel environment of all the department heads being a team, and then each department is a team. So there are many different ways of thinking about the different teams that you're part of. And one of the fundamental things to think about, and we'll keep coming back to this, is investing in trust. But one of the other themes that Adrian and I really wanted to drive through this is to get away from the wagging finger lecture kind of style and to say, well, yeah, okay, that's all very nice. What can I do about this? What are some of the things that I should be doing? Well, leadership is a skill. I'm not someone that believes in great man theory and, people are born to lead. There are leadership skills you can develop, no matter what your leadership ambitions may be. Some of those are interpersonal. How do I relate to myself and how do I relate to others? Remembering if you have a really key leadership role that people look up to you. And I think back in the early days of my career, when myself and one other person were the most experienced receptionists in a front desk team, the standards we set for ourselves, we then imposed on the rest of the team through a bit of peer pressure. We had no authority over anyone else in the team, but we set high standards for ourselves and we made it clear to the other people we worked with that that was an expectation of how we work in our team. One of the first really high-performing teams that I was part of. So recognize when you're being really hard on yourself, if you're a key person that's being looked up to from the rest of the team, that has an impact on everyone else as well. When your team has done something brilliantly and your reaction, because you always set high standards for yourself, is to say, yeah, but we all know we could have done better. There's going to be a few people in your team who have different strengths, motivations, and needs to yours, who are going to feel utterly crushed and demoralized because they feel like no matter how good we do, we never celebrate our successes. It's never good enough. So part of what we need to do as leaders is to understand that how I relate to myself impacts on others around me and on my team, particularly, as I say, when you're in those key pivotal roles of being a respected senior or having the job title on the name badge that gives you that authority. Achievement, how do I get things done, both on my own and with others? And there's a lot more that we'll talk about that when we get to collaboration. But there are some key elements of leadership that you can develop in how you get things done. Obvious one in there would be something like delegation. And then the more strategic side, how do I lead myself and others? How do I manage my time? How do we make decisions? All of that. So very broad, very high level, but 3 areas to think about, because this human element is a magnificent magnifier of leadership effectiveness and culture development. One of the very quick little things that we did when I started with the IHG team was at the end of our first full team get together, and we did them roughly 3 times a year, 2 or 3 times a year. We'd had a full day together, lots of information being downloaded to people. At the end of the day, there were 2 armchairs at the back of the room. So instead of everyone being sat in chairs looking at a podium with a big screen, I went down the back with one of my direct reports and I asked them to come up with some uncomfortable questions to ask me. And everyone had to turn around and we were all sat on the same level and gather around nice and close. And once that direct report started asking those awkward, uncomfortable questions, it encouraged everyone else to come out with them. And I didn't pretend to have all the answers, but I needed to find out what were the burning questions and to show that I was open and honest in how I wanted to handle them. That was an absolutely intentional and obviously intentional play to create a culture and a set of expectations. And that was driving the interpersonal. It was clearly strategic. And it was pretty obvious to everyone what I was trying to achieve in making an immediate change to the culture. So you can use these three as a lens in how you want to look at what you're doing in developing a culture. Adrian, any of those that you want to? Where do you start? Right?
All day. No, I think, well, first of all, I think that's very brave. You know, if you're standing on the outside looking in thinking, come and sit with me and ask me uncomfortable questions, I think that your first reaction is, are you mad?
But no one wants to go first, and you know that.
No one, exactly.
So you have to set it up to get someone to go first.
Absolutely, but I think it is such a clever thing to do, because it shows that you have openness and you're open to new ideas and you're open to you know, that conversation isn't just one way, that it's a two-way conversation. And I also like your comment about sort of setting high standards, because I've learned with our own team, and we have an amazing team at the moment, for sure. But you know, if you're setting those high standards, then no one wants to be that lowest common denominator. You know, everyone's moving forward with the culture and the enthusiasm of the business. And if you allow those standards to drop and your own personal standards to drop, then suddenly that lowest common denominator just goes down and down. So, you know, trying to keep engaged with your team and keep that culture strong in your team, I think is fantastic. And I'm definitely going to do that. I'm going to start asking my team to ask me uncomfortable questions, but I think they ask me uncomfortable questions quite regularly, if I'm honest. With two questions, a little bit about collaboration. Michael, if I could just maybe pepper those in now, and if you want to leave them and answer them as you go through your slides, we can do that. But we have someone here, I haven't got a name though, saying, how do you create a revenue culture if your GM is focused on food and beverage and really dislikes rooms? We've all had those.
There's a couple of, I mean, I would never just try and take one approach to that. And I'd be wanting to ask a bunch more questions in that situation. If they're focused on food and beverage, many people from a food and beverage background are quite entrepreneurial and quite commercial. So see how you can draw them in with that. Recognize the strengths they have and the strengths they don't have, and take a very serious responsibility in how you can bring, fill in the gaps that person doesn't have. And a classic one for revenue managers, we tend to be pretty good at mucking around with data and understanding a bit about what's going on. But we tend to do ourselves a bit of a disservice by using loads of acronyms and loads of terminology that someone who's not from an RM background will be less comfortable with. So what I've done in the past in similar situations, I would never have said so to the people who I was working with at the time, but there's an element of education in what I was doing. So in a couple of the teams I went into, I started off by saying, particularly when I'm new in the team, I'm just trying to make sure I'm learning the unique elements of this business. So I've done the investigation and this is what I've found. What do you think? What comments do you have on the insights that I'm looking to draw out of the data. Now, one of the classic things with GMs from that background is they will probably have a tendency to go with their gut feel, but I don't know the extent to which that GM is trusting you and the extent to which you have earned their trust. Are they allowing you to take the lead in a lot of things, or are they challenging you because their gut feel tells them different? So, bottom right of this slide, the invest in trust. See what you can do to earn little bits of trust. Be supportive to them. Make sure you're not seen to be treating them as not knowing anything, but equally present things in a way that's easy for them to question you and easy for them to understand and develop a partnership with you. So I guess the simplest and most concise I can be, look to develop a partnership in any way they give you an opportunity to. You're the one whose actions you can control. So change how you're working and try different things and see what can work best. But we will expand on that in collaboration.
Yeah, I know that you've got some other stuff going on with your slides, because, well, I guess for me too, a lot of what you said there is about data as well, Michael.
Yeah.
The data doesn't lie as well. And once you establish that level of trust, being able to go to your owner, your GM, and say, look, this is what I've done. Our ADR has changed, or our market segmentation has changed, our profitability has changed. Monitoring those changes and getting the best out of your data, I think sort of, kind of underlines that. But I absolutely agree, it needs to start with partnership. There's two more questions, but I think we're going to answer them as we go through. But I just want the person to know that we're not dismissing them. Great one. Who should a revenue manager report to, GM or sales and marketing? And we have a lot to talk about on that. And then the second part of it is how to change the work culture in a long-serving team. So I think that's quite an interesting one, and probably something that we'll pick up and build on as we go through. But I just wanted to throw those in there.
Yeah, that long-serving team, I think I'm going to hold that one until, in fact, that's going to come out with the dynamic tensions and also with the collaboration. So we'll build more on that. Sorry, I've forgotten the first one. What was the first one? You had two questions for me. One was about the long-serving team. Oh, I can't hear you.
I was on mute. Classic. Yeah, sorry. Who they should report to, GM or sales?
Oh, yes. That's
and
one.
We will definitely talk about that.
That's a really easy one to answer. You don't tend to control that when you first take on a job. As you develop respect and trust within the team, that may well change. So for me, one of the indications of success that I've had in different roles over the years, and my team has had as well, is when the value they place on the work we do means that question almost answers itself over time. So you don't get to choose when you first go in. If you're a general manager asking me that question, I will need to know one more thing from you. Are you wanting someone who's going to challenge you and the rest of your team in the way you think? If the answer to that is yes, then you know what the reporting line should be. If you're wanting someone who's just going to provide data analysis and support an existing member of your team, then you've made your own decision. So the reporting line comes from, what are you trying to achieve? If you want a revenue manager who's going to challenge your whole senior team, yourself included, and you make them someone who reports into one of your direct reports, then I have to ask you how serious you are. So it really is as cut and dried as that. But if you're asking that from the point of view of, I'm in a role I'm not happy with because I don't have the impact on the person that I need, work on the impact. And that's how we solve that problem. Perfect. Brilliant.
Perfect.
Let's get on and have some fun with dynamic tension.
Why did you put that picture of me up, Michael? I asked not to.
I've not been stalking. I've had your daughter, I've had your alter ego. No.
That's it.
Dynamic tension is a healthy thing for revenue managers to have and for teams to have. If you don't feel like there is dynamic tension, it's probably because your decisions are basically being squashed by a hippo. So we don't like hippos in high-performing teams. We don't like hippos in a strong revenue management culture because the hippo is the highest paid person's opinion. So coming back to that earlier question, a couple of questions about GMs and how they work, equally it applies where you've got a revenue management team and a very senior person. If that person's not listening to you and they're just saying, look, I'm the boss at the end of the day, thanks for your input, but this is my opinion, this is what we're doing, that says a lot about how they work. But if you're asking me how to develop a really strong revenue management culture, then be very careful about having hippos that are driving the decisions. So I just thought that'd get a bit of a smile, lighten things up.
Absolutely.
This is more what I'm thinking of when I talk about dynamic tension. So revenue managers should have certain tensions between them and the operations team, whether it's to do with overbooking or anything else. You've got a great example, Adrian, that we talked about when you were in sales, and there was a tension with a contract that you signed, and the revenue manager told you it was a rubbish contract. And you were so happy with having put so much work in and got this massive piece of business. That's the kind of tension that should exist, does exist, but should be proactively resolved from both sides. Both sides have got a responsibility in how that works through. Marketing, thinking back to my days in Accor and IHG, and even with some of the clients I've worked with more recently, it's quite common for these large campaigns to come out from marketing and for RM to have some real struggles with that because either the dates aren't right or the rates aren't right or the package doesn't work for them or the target segment or whatever it might be. And coming back to our question before on having an F&B focused GM, this is where a dynamic tension between an RM and a marketing person can rapidly degrade into a conversation that other people don't understand. When we start talking about Bob and lead time and booking pace and curves and so on, all of this is relevant to the segmentation and who's buying what when and how successful a marketing campaign can be or will be. But you can very quickly lose the room and just get bogged down in stuff that people don't understand. So that tension is there. It needs to be understood. And obviously with customers, we get lots of qualitative feedback on our pricing and our distribution strategies. So those dynamic tensions are real. They should be embraced. And we should, thinking back to those earlier points on leadership and trust and those elements around the interpersonal communications, we should be developing our ability to handle these. So my first statement there is that disagreement is healthy. And I just wanted to go on from that and say that strong teams, as we've said before, are made up of strong individuals. And one of the things I love doing when I'm building a team over time, whenever I get the opportunity to recruit, I'm thinking about diversity and not just ticking a gender diversity box, although that's very healthy. Not just ticking other boxes about people from different cultures and ages and whatever. The really important thing is diversity of perspective, because that supercharges effective decision-making, particularly when you've got an open culture where people can challenge, and raise things that you may not have thought of yourself. If everyone in your team agrees with you all the time, you are going to get blindsided at some stage, because your blind spots are the team's blind spots. Your ability to work with other teams as well is significantly increased if you've got people in your RM team who've come from a sales background or an F&B background or wherever it may be. So strong teams, strong individuals with diversity as a key theme there. And something I've discovered only in the past few years, since I've been doing consulting and leadership programs and management development programs and graduate programs, working with developing talent, and beyond that, then coaching people into leadership roles. This issue around paradoxes, and the simple illustration of paradoxes from a parenting point of view is to think of tough love. So if you're always treating your daughter as a little princess who can do no wrong, that's not the best form of parenting. If you're always enforcing discipline and they never get hugs and they never get told that they're loved, that's too much on the tough side. So you've got these two sides, and either one of them exclusively on their own is far from ideal. The ideal is to be strong in both and to be able to shift between the two. Simple revenue management analogy, are we going for volume or are we going for rate? The answer is yes. Mm-hmm. If we're good at what we're doing, we know how to shift gears. We know how much to trade off on one to achieve more on the other. And there is no simple one-dimensional answer all the time. And in leadership and developing culture and teams, the second example I've got for you there is communication. My cultural background, you can tell from my outrageous foreign accent that I am brought up in Australia, although I lived in Malaysia in my primary school years. But I was actually born in Twickenham, which Carl loves to remind everyone about. Left when I was 6 weeks old, so it barely counts. But I've got an English mum and an Aussie dad. And that means I can play to the stereotypes. When I think, and Adrian, I know you've seen me do this many times over, when I see a situation needs someone to be really direct and call a spade a flame and shovel, then I'll crank up the Aussie accent, I'll play up to that, and that gives people a context to understand that, look, this is just who he is. But you'd be amazed that when I go back and work in the Pacific region, people say I sound very English, particularly when there are high levels of tension that are needing to be resolved. And I want to come across in a more diplomatic way, because some people perceive the British culture to be excruciatingly diplomatic. And I don't mind playing to those two stereotypes, but I'm always striving to choose the right one for the situation. I won't always get it right, but I'm trying to develop a strength in both and an ability to identify which of those strengths to play. If I'm just brutally blunt all the time, that's no way to communicate. If I'm so diplomatic that people think I'm evasive, I mean, that's no damn good either, is it? That comes out in other areas like how do you exert power? Are you very assertive or are you very supportive? What we're striving for is the answer to be yes. I'm strong in both of those, and I can choose the person who's a new staff member still learning their skills, I need to be more supportive of. The person who really knows their stuff and has just gone into cruise mode, I probably need to be a bit more assertive with them, but only as the situation demands. And even, again, from a leadership point of view, how do you handle opinions in the early stages of a project? Are you always listening to what other people say and never putting your own viewpoint forward? Because that's excruciating for the team. They don't know what you think. Or are you not listening to anyone's opinion and just saying, I'm the boss, this is what we're doing, get on board or get out? I mean, neither one of those two is very helpful. So these are the kind of paradoxes that have dynamic tensions within how you work within a team. So embrace those paradoxes. And finally, striving to understanding each other. And this comes to our earlier point about when you're working with people who work with gut feel or their history in sales or wherever else it may be. One of the things we can do in RM is to be the voice of what the business is telling you. What does the data tell you? Yeah. And that's where I'm always interested to see what you're doing and your approach, Adrian, with your data side of your business. So that's striving to understand each other, and RM should be a good voice for what the business is telling us. Any of those that you want to pick on?
Well, actually, I think there's probably a seminar in itself on communication between these teams, because the example you gave of my example of being in sales and not understanding that this great contract that I felt I just won of 1,000 bed nights was actually going to displace business. I had never actually thought of that. You know, I just looked at how much this was going to be worth to the hotel. So sometimes, you know, and even now in our life in the hotels that we work with and in the data that we're giving to hotels, we are hopeful that it's driving then strong marketing campaigns to say, these are not your need dates. You know, you're okay here. You're pacing ahead. Leave that month. We're okay. But here's where you need to focus your pay-per-click or your data or your the money that you're spending on marketing. But I think that line of open communication between both teams, and we talked about it when we had the wonderful Heather Hart on a few weeks ago about why are chefs not brought to the revenue management meeting? Why are people, you know, operational people not brought? But I've got two questions, and I love the first one here. Any tips? And I know some of my team are on here, so if I hear these things coming back at me, I know why. Any tips for telling a hippo that they are a hippo and how their hippo behaviour is impacting the business? And then from Nicholas, we have, how do we revive the culture in 2021? So two brilliant questions there, Michael.
Yeah. I'm going to take the second one first. I think there is an opportunity for us to see this as a time to reset. So old habits can be blown away and new cultures can be very much built in different ways of working. Everyone goes into this recovery bearing scars. So we come out of this together as well. So take it as an opportunity to reset, and the collaboration will talk more about that. How do you deal with a hippo? It depends on the hippo. My normal approach is to call it out, but the way you do that comes back to my communication. Are they the kind of person that can accept a direct challenge on that? Or do you need to be a little bit diplomatic? Are you in a situation where you can say, look, tell me if what I'm bringing to the table is not adding value to the decision-making process. If the way I'm working is not working and it's not helping you to make a decision, say so, because I want to contribute to this. So you could say going first is really key there, but there may be other people who you need to be a bit more diplomatic. The direction you're going in is still the same, where you're asking your hippo, how can we add value to the decision-making process? Or are we wasting each other's time? Now, that's a very direct, concise way of confronting it. But if your assumption is that we're all trying to make the best decisions within the business, and I would go back to the previous slide and talk about developing understanding and inviting. The first step is to try and understand the hippo. The second step would be to call it out, bring it out into the open and see if they're prepared to deal with it. If they're not, then that tells you something pretty clear as well. And then you take your next decision beyond that.
Yeah.
So I am going to be quite a bit more concise in this next one, because this is, I mean, literally we could spend 3 days on this, and I often do with teams, because this comes to your second question from the previous slide. How do we come out of this? Well, one of the curses in our organization, and you can see this from IT right the way through, we tend to have built things up in silos over time. F&B have their point of sale system, Rooms has the PMS, Finance have their accounting system, and so on and so on and so on. There's, I think, an audit I did at the Trafalgar some time ago, we found 40 something different systems, the vast majority of which didn't talk to each other. Some of them were just reporting systems that we subscribed to, but we had BMSs and all sorts of stuff. There's another acronym for you. So we do have this curse of silos. We do have this jargon within different areas. We do have these barriers to us collaborating and working together. But these 5 essential skills of collaboration are best developed by a team. And it does go from left to right. If you don't have everyone on board with that collaborative intention, and this is part of what I was doing when I had those 2 armchairs at the back of the meeting room when we had our first team get together, I was going first. I can only control what I'm doing, but I can set expectations of others. And the message that I was putting forward is I have a collaborative intent here of how I work with a team. Now, this is a team of well over 30 people. And one of the things I was saying to that group is, I'm going to be quite open and I'm going to go first on all of this. And I'm going to say to you, if I tried to divide my time across 36 people, you're all going to get a tiny bit of my time. And that's not going to be terribly effective, because there are drags on my time that go into other parts of the organization where I have to represent this team. So I'm going to focus quite heavily on my direct reports and set very clear expectations on how they work with the rest of the team. But I also have an open invitation to people to talk to me, and I will actively cultivate that in open ways like this, not in secret squirrel backdoor ways, but in open forums like this. But that only works if you step up and join me with that. Now, did everyone in that team embrace that? Absolutely not. Over time, did more and more of them embrace that? Yeah, definitely. And I had to earn their trust in doing that. So this was me as the leader of a team displaying A, my collaborative intent, and B, an expectation of that being a core starting point within our team. And that built on to talking about openness. And this is a classic way that things go wrong between RM and sales, for example. Sales have KPIs and bonuses that they earn money off, and RM don't know what they are. And we might think those guys are getting incentivized to drive volume no matter what. And I'm sat here getting a bonus on RGI, so I need to drive rate. So I think they're trying to work against me because of what their bonuses are. If everyone's open about, this is what I'm incentivized to do, this is why I'm driving, my performance as a salesperson is measured on volume of room nights I sign each year and growing that volume of room nights. Now, how can we do that in a way that works for you as well, Mr. Revenue Manager or Mrs. Revenue Manager? That is the salesperson going first. You could describe that the other way around. And we can go down this path. The accountability, again, in your example, Adrian, between the salesperson and the revenue person. The revenue person should be making themselves accountable for the quality of the contracts that are signed. If my salespeople don't know what they can do to sign a good contract, or how, or have the right information, that's down to me. I need to make sure they understand. So I have a responsibility for their ability to sign better contracts for us. That may mean I need to educate a bit more. That may mean I need to make data digestible so they can use it in negotiations. There's a whole lot of different ways of doing this, but I don't care if that's my KPI or not. I know I need good contracts to get my KPI achieved. And self-awareness, I think, links back quite a bit to what we were talking about before. I'll just flag one more thing that I've been, and this comes to the question on as we're coming out of COVID with all the scars that we all have. People have defensive reactions to things. Each one of us has defensive reactions to things, and stress draws those things out. So self-awareness of your defensive reactions when emotions take over, and self-awareness of your ability sometimes to press another person's buttons. We all have someone that we know almost at will can press those buttons that get a reaction out of us, often within the family, but many times within business as well. Know those about yourself, but also know when you trigger those in others in a way that is not constructive. So that self-awareness is really key. And I think you can see from how I'm describing all of this, that it really does come all together with a team if you work through this together. And there's a cracking opportunity right now to have a reset and address these 5 skills of collaboration. Adrian, anything you want to expand on?
Gosh, Michael, again, so much that you could talk about on each
Yeah.
of those. But I think one of the things that you and I talked about the other day was that self-accountability, that, you can, I love that, what you just said there about you can change your behavior, but in an effort to influence others, because you can't change their behavior. But I think this time, there's so many negatives that can be said about this time, but if we're trying to take something positive out of it, we literally have a few weeks left, to look at who we have left in our team, look at their skill sets, look at how we can actually improve the culture, the systems, the processes, so that we do come out of this stronger and better. And as you know, I am a firm advocate of working together in teams. I hate that term, breaking down silos, but we all know what it means to get that conversation going. And I think in a lot of ways, technology and data is going to be, not a salvation, but a firm footing for which the industry is going to come out of this, and to allow our teams to do more jobs with less resources. I'm very conscious of your time, Michael, but I do have one question here.
Go ahead.
What if the revenue manager is also the sales and marketing manager, and the team are all working for decades, that they reject the revenue decisions are made? So basically, the revenue manager is also the sales and marketing manager. And the kind of revenue decisions that have been made in the past are just really rejected and not taken seriously. Is that back to what we talked about right at the start of trying to change the culture at the top then?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I think also, Adrian, you and I have seen over the years, we've been watching revenue management develop as a profession within our hotel industry in particular. We are seeing more and more of our peers who started this journey at around the time we did or soon after, going into commercial roles where they have responsibility for sales, marketing, distribution, pricing, and revenue management. One of the reasons that strong revenue managers end up in that situation is because to achieve what you need to as a revenue manager effectively, you need to know what's going on in the world of sales and marketing and distribution and the results of pricing. Whereas a salesperson, large organizations, you can even get pigeonholed into being a leisure salesperson or a corporate salesperson or a wedding salesperson or whatever it might be. Whereas revenue managers have to accept that broad responsibility because you're responsible for the top line results at the end of the day. And you need to try and pull those levers of segmentation, pricing, distribution. So you need to understand the whole thing and the balancing act in it. I'd be tempted to go back and rework the dynamic tension expect dynamic tension, embrace it, and find ways through it. That's the art of a good RM culture. Yeah. And it's pretty difficult. That's why none of this is simple. I mean, in an hour, we've just rattled off a whole lot of stuff. And I'm just sitting there going, geez, none of this stuff is easy, right?
But that's what makes the role so exciting. And that keeps everyone engaged. And, literally I get up in the morning and I'm excited. And I genuinely do believe I have the best job in the world. And I think, revenue management is just such a great thing because it is constantly changing and evolving. My lovely friend, Altaf, he always gives us a shout out here. And he's got a couple of questions, right. And I certainly have an opinion on them. But revenue management, is that taking all the personalities and getting the job done? Is that the way forward? So is it just data? Is it artificial intelligence? Now, anyone who has heard me, and you've heard me speak about this, AI is such an overused word. AI is just a very different, complex form of machine learning. And there's machine learning and there's AI, and those lines are getting blurred a little bit. In my opinion, and we heard this at Jane, our good friend, Ali Northfield's conference. Without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And without an opinion, you're just another person with data. So for me, that revenue management of having the data, but also knowing your business is really key. But letting those numbers form and help you maximize your decisions. Sorry, Michael, go on.
There's a third piece we need to put in there, which is the soft skills.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we're talking about and where my passion lies and where, all the best algorithms in the world, the best talent in the world, unless you can get people coming along on the ride with you, you're going to have things like GMs putting in dummy blocks to make it look like they're overbooked, forcing bookings through a back door, making a reservation on a bar rate and then just changing the rate in the PMS and doing all sorts of, there's all sorts of stuff that gets incredibly messy. But you've got to have, why is revenue management great fun? Why is it the best job? You've got to understand the business. You've got to be able to work with the data. And finance people tell us that we're bigger spreadsheet geeks than they are, because we use spreadsheets to find answers to new questions that maybe the systems don't already have the answer for, or we're trying to work it through in our own minds. So we need to be able to do the spreadsheet geek thing, but we also need to have the human skills to get this kind of leadership from within a business. Exerting, can I control the GM? No. Can I influence the GM? Abso-flamin-lutely. Can I control the salesperson? No. Can I influence them? Most definitely. And if I'm really good at that, I'll know, because they'll start coming to me asking for me to help them get what they want out of a particular negotiation or whatever it might be. That's when you know you're really making an impact. And that's where the dynamic tensions, they're now embracing it and coming to you with their problems to get you to help them against the procurement person on the other side of the table. Happy days.
Absolutely. Michael, I'm very conscious of your time. I know that you wanted to summarize some stuff, so I'll let you go.
Just very quickly to say 3 key themes that we chose to hit on. Look, there's entire degrees you can do on leadership. We could do long sessions on collaboration and dynamic tension, but let's just not let the hippos take over. And if anyone does want to carry on this conversation about specifics to do with the business situation that you're in, obviously the reason I'm on this with Adrian and Right Revenue is because you guys feel very strongly about these sorts of things. Clearly, I've got a skill set and a little library behind me that's
one of your libraries.
Just about every room in the house, in the Heyward household, but without a joke. So yeah, please do reach out to us if there's any help that we can be in any way that we can. That's what we're here for. And thank you for the opportunity, Adrian.
No, listen, as I said at the top, Michael, genuinely, you know that you are one of the most inspirational people in the industry, and certainly a massive inspiration for me. And that's not just, we have the lovely Inna who said exactly the same. Inna, who is one of my favourite young revenue managers, and Inna said that you're such an inspiration. I totally agree. Ethna, thank you. What an absolutely brilliant presentation, the best yet. Thank you so much, Adrian and Michael. Well, thank you, Ethna. But just to let everyone know, the recording will go out to everyone who registered today. We do keep it as a closed session. Michael's details will be on that. And I genuinely mean this, and this is not, Michael was aware of this at the start, this is not a pitching for either Right Revenue or for Michael's services, but if any of you are really interested in getting great leadership and collaboration through your teams, use this time now, and we will certainly send out Michael's details for you as well. You touched very briefly there on something that we're both involved in a little bit, and that's the Hospice Certificate of Revenue Management. The new course is kicking off in March. And if any of you are interested in putting your key people through that, it's a great qualification. Just reach out to me and we can send you more details on that. Visit our new website as well. I'd love to see what any of you think of our new website. It went live this week. But we're here for all of you, you know that. And Michael, again, genuinely thank you so much for your time. All of this is done completely free of charge. On all of those resources and all of that knowledge Michael gives very openly and readily. So thank you so much, Michael. It's been a genuine privilege to have you on, and I can't wait to see you in London, and I owe you a huge gin and tonic. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Absolute delight. Thanks, Adrian.
All right, take care. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.